WLRN Video presents.
Welcome to another WLRN extended interview. My name is April No, WLRN Canadian member and gender heretic. In this interview, Emiliann Lorenzen sat down with Joey Brite to talk about her organization, Can I Get a Witness, and her participation in counter-protesting the Netflix walkout. Joey is a lifelong activist whose recent work focuses on protesting gender clinics. This interview explores the theories and strategies behind activism and different protest styles. Enjoy, sisters.
Okay, so I'm Emiliann Lorenzen with WLRN, and I'm here with Joey Brite. Hi,
Hey.
Joey. Hey. So I want you to kind of introduce yourself a little bit. I know that you have been interviewed by WLRN before, so some listeners and viewers might be familiar with you already, but what's just like a brief overview of who you are?
I'm a Californian. It's funny, I kind of think about that first because there aren't many native Californians. I'm in my 60s. When I look back, I've been doing questioning authority since I was 10 years old. Got in trouble at school for questioning certain policies that they had about, interestingly enough, about the girls' bathrooms, which had nothing to do with gender ideology. It had to do with repairs and making sure that our bathrooms were going. I was questioning that, and they were like, "What's this little kid doing that?" And I ended up in the principal's office for questioning about why the pipes hadn't been fixed, and there was this rusty thing, that was hanging out. I just think of that now. It's a very interesting analogy because I asked a question and I immediately got sent to the principal's office.
Mhm.
So that was interesting. And of course, it was like, case dismissed, let her go on, with her day. I was the fastest runner in the school. Everything was segregated, in sports with boys and girls. So I come from this thing. And then by the time I was 12, I literally was writing letters to the editor, questioning certain people in the community. There was a family that had just delivered their 11th and 12th child. And I looked at this picture of this woman and I thought, God, that's a lot of babies. And, this is, again, back in the 60s, a 12-year-old not asking her parents if I could send a letter to the editor. I did. It embarrassed my parents because the neighbors were mad that I did this. And all of this informed me. And there was a woman, I might have mentioned this in an interview before. There was a woman, an older woman, who called me up after that letter to the editor that I wrote, which I don't need to go into all the details, but it clearly had to do with like population control, my concerns about the sustainability of, humans on the planet and all that stuff. And when I got in trouble, that woman called our house, because back in those days, you could look in the phone book, right? Everybody's in there. Unless you paid to keep your name out of the phone book, you were in the phone book, address, phone, everything. And this woman called and she got my mom and she wanted to speak to me. And she was the mother-in-law of this family that I had talked about that had the 12 children. She called me and said I was a brave little girl, that she hoped that I would continue speaking out. And then she asked to talk to my mother. And all I know to this day is that my mother was on the phone going, yes, okay, yes, like, bye. And that was something that we only broached one time when my mom and I spoke a couple of years before she died about a lot of things from my childhood, some things that she remembered, some that she didn't. And I think that I've always been a little activist. I've always questioned, well, who are the popular kids? Like, why do they get to do that? And, others don't. And I have always been very critical of visuals and advertising and how that manipulates us and how it excites us and how it can be really inspiring and how it can really depress us. And so films, advertising, all that stuff, music, the accompaniment of all that stuff. I've said quite often, I'm a film freak. I wish that I had been involved somehow in the movie industry for like a career, but it's just informed everything else that I've done. And activism as a participatory element of just being human. When you think about, I've gone into this, my mother had us going like every other weekend or so, door to door, to collect money for muscular dystrophy.
Mm.
And I think that even though we didn't have anybody in our family with muscular dystrophy, so I didn't have a very personal thing to connect it to, my mom taught me to engage with strangers, to think outside of our own family and look at how other people needed help. And in that case, it was, back in the day when you actually did go door to door
Mhm.
and ask people for money. And it was legit a lot of the times, like with my mom, we'd go, I had receipts for everything. I learned a lot about interacting with people and their responses to things and reactions to things, and what's the difference with that. So I feel like activism is anything where we as citizens learn about something, and if we see an injustice or what we is a perceived injustice, we want to find out more about it and actually do something to make it better for that group of people. If it affects us in a, personally or not, what does that mean to our just being in the world?
Mhm.
That to me is activism. And I did learn that from an early age. And honestly, there are only brief periods of time where I feel like I haven't been actively involved in some kind of movement, in some kind of injustice where I could contribute and make something better.
Mhm.
That's activism. The other thing about that is how activism takes on different kinds of forms and the ways that we choose to engage. So that's kind of me. I mean, I'm a former surfer. I still ride a skateboard. I'm, one of those women that always refused to. I changed the dress codes at my junior high. When I was 14, girls could not wear anything but skirts or dresses. And I just, without even asking, decided one day, I was nervous about it, but I thought, what are they going to do? And I wore a pair of pants to school. It caused a huge uproar. But what happened was, that was on a Friday. I showed up, it was called Casual Day. The following Friday, without me doing anything except talking to a couple of my friends, it was like 6 girls showed up, and then it was like kind of that. And then I got called into the office because I had like started this thing. And I was like, well, what are the dress codes and all that? And they changed them because all these girls said, we want to wear pants.
Mhm.
So that's the kind of person, I mean, if any of these examples, so who I am in my 60s, I'm no different. And I have that eye, as I said, for film and for visuals and for also content and context of what we do in any conversation, in any place that we work, how we treat other people. I by no means haven't faltered many times and had to suffer consequences from certain things that happened that later I went, maybe that wasn't the best approach. But you either learn from that.
Mhm.
And for me, going back to the activism, there is no need to reinvent the wheel on a lot of this stuff. I can't think of one thing. I've been racking my brain around that for the last couple of weeks. And there are others that I learned in my generation. It's part of that. I think that you're probably like that too, Emiliann, is that this idea that there are elders usually, there are people that have gone before me. And that is very important to me, to look at what that guy did, what that woman did, what, even that kid when I was a kid, what did they already do that worked or what didn't work? And how can I learn from them and then decide to adapt or alter something and use a little bit of that kind of legacy and that reverence. I've always had. Again, I always haven't always done the best job with that, but I feel like I've learned from that, and it has helped to get me to the place that I am now, where I make certain decisions.
Mhm.
And that's in everything. It affects personal relationships. It affects which jobs I have. And I've basically been self-employed for quite a while. I still am.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been, and that's personal, but it's also looking at the past. I mean, I have a degree in English, and that's something we would talk about as writers, is like, you can't write in a bubble, and pretend like you're doing something totally original. You
Mhm.
have to look at what came before you and understand, oh, I'm riffing off of T.S. Eliot or whoever. Um, so you now run Can I Get a Witness?
Mhm.
So what is that, and how has your experience with activism informed that style of protesting with Can I Get a Witness?
Well, Can I Get a Witness, when I had that as a concept, had nothing to do with protesting the gender clinics, which is what I've been doing all year, getting people to do that and being behind the scenes of that. Can I Get a Witness did start out, I wanted to have something that was going to be a much larger conversation that I saw building and building and building since my decades already of trying to look at what is going on with us. Before anybody coined a phrase, gender ideology industry, which is what then added to the lexicon when Jennifer Billick's work came out, in 2018. I had a whole thing leading to, because of all these cancellations that I saw going on in 2018, came 2019, which really was, we saw a purge of a lot of women starting to get off of social media. And in April, when Twitter took me off, my reaction was to start a conference and to have a conference. And said this before, it was only a conference.
Mhm.
And it was going to be a one-time conference in the flesh. People would meet each other. We'd strategize, talk about where this gender ideology industry was affecting people. Why was this social contagion? It was part social contagion that was manufactured, I believe, from a very clever, evil scheme, that had to do with money. We knew that kids were starting to get involved and starting to become this fodder for these experimentations. All of that. Can I Get a Witness was a one-time conference that happened in August of 2020, but it was dreamed up in April of 2019 when I got kicked off Twitter.
Mm.
That whole year, I was planning speakers. Where's it going to be? How long is it going to go? How much is this going to cost me? And then I went, oh, if I do this, I'm going to have to create a company to try to protect myself. This was months, and it was a lot of money and legal visits and things like that to create a business, to create a company, not a nonprofit, to be able to know for myself that I would answer to myself. I would employ some other people for different periods of time, or make sure that people got paid, or offer them money. Some of them refused, when that came around. So when Can I Get a Witness in the conference itself, that went on for 13 hours back on August 8th of 2020, of course, from COVID, turned it into an online thing. After that happened, everybody was like, what are you going to do? What are you following this up with? Well, all of this material and content came out of that conference that I wasn't expecting. I hadn't planned on massive numbers of participants connecting with each other in Discord, which is what the tech woman that I hired came up with that idea. And then I involved, another tech woman, and there were 3 tech women that ended up in the last few days. There was 3 of them. One I worked with for 5 months, but there were conversations and connections that were made. And with some of the guests that I had, the speakers, that created a whole other thing. But what happened for me was that personally, I got a ton of emails from different parents. And I knew in 2019, when I saw the growth of these clinics that I thought were specifically starting to go after kids, I had been focusing on the men and women's sports. And then I started to look at this trend. And I thought, well, how am I going to do anything about this gender clinic stuff? Is crazy. And of course, this is pre-meeting of the gender mapper, Alex Aaron, at all. I didn't know her. I didn't know her till after the conference. I started Googling gender clinic, and I would see that these numbers, there were a lot, and then I'd start putting in different cities, Boston, Chicago, Miami, and of course in California, because I already knew something was going on with the breasts being removed, because I watched my whole community fall apart because of this stuff. when I started thinking, oh my God, I think this thing is really growing. Look at all these clinics. This is 2019, again, just like the idea of having a conference. So that got kind of tucked in the back of my head. Now I do the conference. All of these parents participated in the conference. I didn't know how many had seen it. I still don't know really how many of them are parents, but I've gotten a lot of emails. And I've developed personal relationships with many parents. And as others, like my friend Lynn Meager, getting to hear stories and know, with what Lisa Littman's work was and everything, is seeing these patterns develop, right? Where we know now what we were seeing with girls, joining with each other, like what, Abigail wrote about off of Lisa Littman's work. And then we started seeing in the past year, I would say, these patterns of boys and what's going on with boys and kids. And again, I had no idea exactly why this was going on. And we now know that it's connected to the internet in an enormous way. I mean, it is an absolute proven thing. And again, this is the work of Alex Aaron and the Gender Mapper. So can I get a witness that was a conference? And for months, everybody bugging me about it. I did not know if I was ever going to be able to get people around that as an issue. And everybody that I spoke with, whether it was online or in person, everybody was too terrified. I'd seen an attack myself. I got away from one in San Francisco. And it was a guy that they were harassing for something. And this was before people were saying you're a genital fetishist and all these stupid terms they were coming up with. I knew these kinds of attacks because I had lived as a lesbian separatist for quite a while. So within the greater lesbian community, lesbian separatists were a small bubble as well. We had different ideas and philosophies about how we thought we were going to have and thrive and be in the world. Mm-hmm. So I already knew what it was like I was always, it seems like I ended up being on the outside of a lot of other more popular cultures within cultures. I was like in a subculture, if you will. And now trying to get anybody to talk about these issues where the pronoun things started to come in, where I'm literally working at a business where I'm the general manager of this business, where the community comes in, it's public. And all of a sudden I'm getting these sheets that are telling me I need to poke stuff up on the walls. And there's this whole new transgender thing up there that I have to display, these things that are being pushed on us. So can I get a witness rather than thinking, oh, I have to follow this up with another conference? For me, a lot of things are about starting the conversation. It might be a one-off. I still don't know if that's quite a one-off, but it might be. But what happened was after that, and by the time the winter came last year, these parents in Los Angeles, just out of frustration, angst, fury, went and stood in front of Children's Hospital Los Angeles. And I, and just a handful of people, got about 48 hours notice on that. And my PR brain, which I've been working in the music world for a while, helping to promote jazz and jazz instrumentalists, female jazz instrumentalists in particular, that's a very tiny, there's another little genre that's teeny tiny. How do we make that expanded? And I love the music. So I was really into that. And everything that I've learned through activism, through popular culture, studying that, film, getting half of an anthropology degree, a little bit in sociology, all this stuff just, melding. I decided that I really wanted to go after clinics the moment that family did that. The moment that family did that, that's what I wanted to do. So I started organizing in cities. I had lots of contacts. I partnered up for a moment with a nonprofit, it was Partners for Ethical Care, and launched in March of this year, 2021. We did 3 cities in one day, from the East Coast to the West. It was extremely successful, more eyeballs than have ever been on anything like that. And this is the idea that Americans are very terrified to go out and do anything, because we saw what happened in 2020 all over the world. We saw what happened in the big cities in America. There was massive stuff focused around race, with the killing of George Floyd and all of this. It was like that affected a whole series of things. And it also gave even a new life and a new birth to a horrible group of people that aren't really even one group. It's factions of an ideology called Antifa. And they're just vile and violent. And a lot of them are these, little renegades of young people, a lot of them who are just pissed off, and they just want to do things like burn cars and burn dumpsters and push people down and threaten, and especially go after women and terrorize, people. So the general population saw a lot of that stuff. Black Lives Matter was captured with this money that has to do with pushing this trans narrative, this idea when we say trans and nobody can even define it. And what we always come back with is don't even talk about that. It's not an identity. It's not a thing. This is a made up cause. It's not a civil rights cause. But anyway, to not delve into that too much, Can I Get a Witness became, as I had stated in the beginning, that it's an educational business, if you will, to give voice to people who've been silenced, canceled, attacked physically or online. They've lost their jobs, and maybe within our own communities, because there are many of them. There's no women's movement in the United States. I'm going to make that really clear from my perspective. There are lots of movements coming from different individuals. There are different leaders that are more clear on certain areas, but we're a huge country. There are women that I know that know a hell of a lot more than I do about what's going on back east, and need to grasp what's going on in different communities, even between the South, the Midway and the North. Same thing with the Midwest, same thing, California up to Washington. When I'm just talking, not all North America, America, it's huge. And the idea of building a women's movement, which is what I thought Can I Get a Witness would, because of giving voice to people that have been silenced and whatever, that giving that voice was going to grow new leadership within something I thought was really basic: feminism, the rights of women, the safeguarding of children, all of that stuff, being connected. In my journey to do that, I have met people from all over the world that are fighting similar fights in their own countries. But I know I'm living in the country that exported all this stuff to the UK, to Australia, to a Western world. Just became this white, more middle class and upper class, again, white kind of movement of trying to get people to believe that there is such a thing as human beings being born in the wrong body, and that they just missed it. Their 21-year-old son that all of a sudden came home and said, "This is the last time you're going to see me as a young man. My name is Betty. And when I come back, I'm going to be wearing a dress and stuff. And I want you to, call me Betty, because I really I've not been in the body that I was assigned." And here are these parents kind of, you got parents that are in their 40s, 50s going, "What the hell is my son telling me?" And there we go. I just figured that at some point, if we could have a more cohesive movement that lift women up and respect that the profession that they're in, whether they're a lawyer, whether they're a physician, whether they have been a community activist, whether they are an artist in some other fashion, a filmmaker, whatever, that we would come together and create a new, refreshed movement that includes the understanding of technology, how it's affected all of us, and how we communicate and what we do with each other. And with this new potential movement that I still, had in my mind, there weren't going to be any hierarchies. There wouldn't be any, oh, there's one or two leaders and we listen to everything they say and do. There wouldn't be one or two organizations and everybody puts their focus on that. And then the rest of the Western world, the outside world, when they think of America and a women's movement, that they just think of one or two things, that there are many things, and that we brought our talents, our visions, even our disagreements about how to approach things and have discussions about those. That was, can I get a witness to me? That's how this year started out with the protesting, my being critical of what was going on in our own, as we say, the philosophy. I don't want to say more than a movement. I wrote an article, post, can I get a witness, that was very critical of the reader. It was a challenge to the reader to look at, what are you looking at when you say you're a critical thinker, when you say you are a gender critical person? Why are you putting up YouTubes of Blair White calling him she and saying that I wish my husband would listen to her?
Mm-hmm.
Like that, we really need to look at that. And I think that in this confusion in the general public that's starting to come up with, why are all these men saying that the women, particularly, you don't hear it so much from women who think they're men. It's there, and there's a few vocal, entities that do this, but it's such a confusion. And I think it was designed to be such a confusion that people are grabbing like a whack-a-mole at different areas of this. They don't know what to go after first. Meanwhile, they've got their child telling them, if you don't let me get my puberty blockers, an 8-year-old who's now they're becoming the parent, they have self-diagnosed, they have been on the internet, and probably they've already been into porn for a couple of years, and they're actually addicted to that. And they've got their friends online telling them, lock your mom out of the house, tell your dad he's a transphobe and that you're going to kill yourself if you don't get the cross-sex hormones, the wrong sex hormones.
Mm-hmm.
These are these narratives that we're dealing with, and within this community that is very small when you look at other communities in the world and the general public doesn't even know about. It's really important when we see J.K. Rowling, who was not an activist, that she might be doing things in her personal life. We know that she does give money to all kinds of great causes. But when you see somebody that big with a teeny tiny little faction of bullies that are trying to threaten her and cancel her,
Mm-hmm.
she's one of the most uncancelable people that I can think of. But when you take that and I take you, and if you wrote something or you did an interview with somebody that others didn't like, and there's like, she did that thing, don't watch any of her YouTubes. When you've got somebody as brave as Vanessa Volke broadcasting on her YouTube channel and saying, look at what's going on to these women, these men are in women's prisons, and YouTube goes, boop, disappears right when she's broadcasting. That's what Can I Get a Witness existed for, is to try to start tracking and looking and see who are these voices that we're all concerned about similar things and similar dangers, because there are so many of them.
Mm-hmm.
So Can I Get a Witness went from an idea that was a conference to on the ground activism, which are my roots anyway, and organizing that, and then the love of PR and how do these things, how do these things happen? How do we get it even bigger? Inviting other women and like Amy Sousa, who's got brilliant ideas. How do these things get, activated? Being able to talk with feminists like she is and disagree on certain things, or just have conversations about how could this thing, and come to certain places to work together. This is all Can I Get a Witness? It's not just one thing anymore. And I, as Joey Brite, am my own person who is doing all kinds of things in the ways of activism that has nothing to do with the gender critical, concept either. I'm still in the music industry. I'm still doing things in film. I'm still doing things with other activists and helping with them. The one big movement that I was involved with for a long time was animal activism. And I haven't been doing anything actively with that because, in big part, because that community was completely captured. And in being involved in animal activism, you have to trust who you're standing next to when you do anything. And that has varying degrees of radicalness or risk taking or whatever. But, you know, of everything I've ever done, that is the movement that I learned the most of what I'm adopting now, working with people and these protests moving forward. But the parents, and now it moving from me and trying to get people activated, new parents are coming out and saying, where do I go? What do I do? How can I be as safe as possible? Doing these Zoom things, it's not the same as one-on-one. Most people don't understand the difference between doing street theater, guerrilla activism, which if you watched, were you going to ask me anything about the Netflix thing?
Yeah.
Sorry, did I take you out of?
No, that's okay.
We barely spoke about what we were going to, talk about, but I think you were excited about that. So I'll shut up at this point. You can.
Well, one thing I wanted to point out about Can I Get a Witness is it's not just this feminist organization where it's just like the same type of women with similar politics coming together and doing activism. From my understanding, it's mainly parents. There are feminists involved, but it's mainly like the average person who maybe knows nothing about activism and wants to do something. I mean, most of them are parents with ROGD kids who are just lost and angry and want to do something. So what is it like for you working with people who aren't experienced in activism?
It's been exciting. It's been a real re-greasing of wheels that I haven't used in a while. And I would say most recently in a very, I call it, a straight political way, like being involved in the Obama campaign back in 2007, 2008, 2009. It was all very exciting. 2012, it wasn't as exciting because I started examining that this guy was becoming an elitist in terms of the way that he ruled. Again, my opinion. Being a lifelong Democrat, all that stuff, these things coming up in activism is that what I have been criticized for and what I'm very interested in are the conversations and the relationships that have been built between women like me, lesbian, feminist, even, to the so-called, this idea that people call themselves, these rad femmes. I don't relate to that because to me, already being a feminist was a radical thing. That was it. Now here we are in 2021, all of a sudden, all these women have to call themselves radical feminine. I'm like, in my estimation, they don't even understand what radicalism is because they haven't done anything in terms of, again, boots on the ground, actually getting people together, producing events, understanding how things are organized, how they need to, how different people with different ideas, even opposing ideas, how they have to work together sometimes to make a really wonderful thing happen, the success of that. Where was I going with this? This idea of working with people who have not been activists before, it's extremely challenging. Again, that's exciting. It's challenging, but the exciting thing is at this point, Emily, is that more of the new parents that I'm meeting, see the parents that have become veterans of this already with the ROGD kids who've been worn out by the only model that they've had, which is emotional support, which is in large part this wonderful organization called Parents of Rapid Onset Gender Dysphoric Kids, PROGDK. They have a website. That's been a fantastic organization for usually first-time parents to come in and realize I'm not alone. It's kind of like AA in that way. I'm not alone. There's a problem here. Oh my God, all these other people have a very similar problem to mine. What do we do? That is kind of the extent, though, from what I understand at this point, that PROGDK can offer, because it's not an activist organization. What I'm watching because of doing all these Zoom and training sessions all year with over 70 people now that have been involved in these protests. There's been like a dozen protests at this time, or it will be, shortly. At the time of this recording, there's going to be a couple of things going on very soon. What I've learned is the thing that I've dreamt about, which is that even though at the risk of safety, because I cannot control what other people do, I don't want to even try to control that. All I can do is say to people, there are things in place that were put in place long before I was around that have to do with basic, tried and true safety, as much as can happen in a standard, peaceful protest. I'm not talking about nonviolent direct action. That to me is something that went out by the time the Black Panthers showed up, they were using those methods. It's often called NVDA, nonviolent direct action. That stuff was happening in the 60s, where people literally were having meetings every day. We're talking, the Black Civil Rights Movement here in the United States. That stuff required hours and hours and hours of people and their time and personal relationships and developing theories and practicing theories of things. How was the media going to cover things? Who should stand in the front? Who could afford to have their head cracked? Who could afford to stand in the front when the hoses they knew were going to be turned on? Who was going to sit at the lunch counter? Who was ready to be able to physically handle being pulled from behind and thrown on the ground? These are the conversations. These are the things where they knew if Life magazine showed up and took pictures, or CBS, which was often there with the cameras, who was going to be the spokesperson while their comrade was laying on the ground bleeding, or who was willing to have that, cut that they were dabbing while the newsman was talking to them. Mm-hmm. All that stuff has always been in my mind. I've been in many situations where you see press and you can look at each other ahead and you can talk about situations ahead about, is there some way we can get attention for our thing while we're here, while the press is here? Lots of different things like that. In the peaceful protests, which I say that I do with Can I Get a Witness protests that have been happening, and you went through the training. Mm-hmm. You see that some of the philosophy and the things that I said, like I said, I didn't invent this stuff. What I have insisted on with people is if you who've been trained in this were in a protest, you well know that I have said in general, anybody in that line, we don't engage in adversarial ways with people. If somebody comes up and they've literally pulled a sign off of you, well, yeah, physically that can affect you, but you let it go. We're not going to have any kind of battle out with anybody. We're not going to chase after anybody. We're not going to scream and yell at people. That is the initial thing, is that we are standing in front of a building that represents an enormous business that thrives on needing more and more bodies, and they're going after younger and younger children. Even now, to this date, when I'm speaking with you, Emily, that I'm learning just in the last week, I thought this might be coming, and just in the last week, now I've gotten evidence of it. They're trying to skip puberty blockers. They're trying to go right to cross-sex hormones with 9-year-old kids. It's like, let's cut to the chase. Let's just go there. I've just found this out this past week. Wow. When we're standing in front of these institutions, these businesses with the capital, dollar signs in the word, they don't like us there. They don't want us there. No, they're not going to come out and hose us down. No, they aren't going to come out and pull us from behind and try to shove us to the ground. They're not going to come out, and do anything like that. But they send their little minions and make calls, or, whatever they can do. They can send their repair trucks all of a sudden and say, we need to move from an area. They can do what they did in Los Angeles, which was to send out guards and tell the very legal 20-something people that were there that you filmed, mm-hmm. that they have to move from the sidewalk because it's illegal for them to be there. Now, I had talked to everybody ahead of time. Again, I'm trying to impart on everybody as much as I can why I have my safety people, monitors on each side. And there's one of the safety monitors thinking, this doesn't seem right. But She wanted to make sure that they all didn't get in trouble, and I wasn't there. And all I can do is tell in the aftermath and the debriefing about that stuff or speaking with people, how did that come out? How did that come out the way that it did? You know, and I see the footage where they're standing at the very edge of the sidewalk, which pushes the leader to make the decision to go out in the street,
On Sunset Boulevard.
which I never want to see. Right.
Yeah. Mhm.
Again, these protests by and large have been extremely successful. Every single one of them has had a problem that we dissect later and look at and go, what happened here? How can we, do this better? This is not a series of protests against the devil that we're fighting now that has ever occurred. But we do know they have massive investment in keeping the public from knowing what's going on behind closed doors. They have already indoctrinated them. They've indoctrinated their children. It's a religion. It's a cult, whatever you want to call it. And boy, oh boy, some of the biggest enemies we can have are teenagers and 20-somethings that are saying, you're this, you're a that, you're a bigot, you're a blah, blah. And nobody wants to be hurt. And that's what they're counting on. So this activism has finally gotten to a place where I feel like the word, and we need it still every day, and I'm not planning on backing off of protesting, but the word has gotten to just a handful of parents now that are ready, boots on the ground, organizing. Again, they may not do it in the way that I think is the safest or whatever, but God damn it, I'm going to help. How do you get this publicized? How does this get so that visuals, people see this stuff, and the interviews and all of that, everything gets out. And after a whole year fighting with that, parents are finally starting to have, and what's going to happen really soon is a parent-led protest that I can't say that it had nothing to do with me. It clearly did. But I am not responsible for trying to work with everybody, go through everything that my standards call for, but I support it. I'm going to be there. I'm going to make sure it gets documented. And what's happening with this parent-led thing now is that in a way allows me to continue growing the message of this, because parents want to become more active now. I get emails all the time. Oh, I just found your video. Are you the one that did this thing? How can I get involved? What do I do? That little seed, the images of double mastectomies being done that I got hell for, at the beginning of this thing. Hell exists on Twitter. Twitter is not real. We know that anybody that connects on Twitter and you develop relationships, those happen. Those genuine relationships do happen. But that takes patience and a presence with each other that most people on Twitter don't have. I would say the majority. It's noise. But you're asking me about people, back to your original question. I am so happy to revisit this idea that first came to me in the Obama campaign of dealing with people completely across the aisle from me. Religious right, the movement that began being called pro-life, that I just call, and then the other side, the side that I was on, so anti-abortion or anti-life. There have been narratives that have come out of the Republican Party, that have come out of conservative religious organizations that have absolutely been brilliant. And I've studied those. And now I'm actually, and since 2007 in Obama, I'm actually sitting with people. I'm talking with them now on Zooms. We have long conversations and all this. We don't agree on everything. But I believe at this point in time, there's no left and right in this country anymore. There really hasn't been for years. It's just that we're seeing it in a different way now. I don't go by this left-right Democrat versus Republican bullshit anymore. And I wouldn't have told you that, back in 2007. I absolutely still believed in the Democratic Party and all of that. I was very hardcore about that. Not anymore, not when my governor is allowing men to rape women in the prisons that are very close to where I live.
Yeah.
Thank you, Governor Newsom. Thank you, Kamala Harris, for allowing in 2019 for boys, biological boys, to compete with girls in high school. I'm done. I'm done. All the gloves are off. They're literally off. I'm taking boxing again. I haven't done it in about 30 years.
Nice.
Gotten back in. I'm a little boxer, but so I am finding challenges but fewer challenges, Emily, than I am within my own kind of movement, if you will, in a way. There's just again, it's a little voices, but they try to make themselves really annoying. And then I have to try to figure out, well, why are they doing that? This is the stuff that happens, I think, when any kind of an idea of a movement. Again, I come back to the Black Panthers all the time. It's one that I have learned a lot from the disagreements that went on in that, to the marketing, to what anything is, going on today. Trying to examine the players, the characters, people like Obama that I thought, this guy, grassroots organizer, great. Is he going to turn into a politician? Because basically, once you become a politician, it's kind of like, it's like when you start a nonprofit. At first, it seems like a good idea and you have a mission. And what I have seen happen with lots of nonprofits is that they eat themselves, and they care about the money that's coming in that they finally have gotten. And once the money comes in, only certain people get the raises, the bigger salaries, and then people get pushed out that are really still working for the original goal. They tend to get squished out time after time after time. So that's why I knew I didn't want to be a nonprofit. I wanted to be an independent business, not a collective, not having to reach consensus with people about certain decisions. And what I personally choose to understand, my ethics and my convictions around running protests, which is what I've been seen for this year, other than having criticisms within the women's movement, within the gender critical movement, all of this, because there really isn't a cohesive anything with that, right? I've criticized those publicly. I've written articles, and that's Joey Brite. That is Joey Brite. Can I get a witness that's had this other mission? The thing that brings me in the third person saying Joey Brite and can I get a witness together is that my business, me, does not want to use the language. I draw the line at believing that there are any made up identities that have any kind of say in my life, what I'm doing. I will not be compelled. I won't obey. A lot of people, this idea of complying it's not going to work. And there's very few of us that actually care about that. One of the things you and I have had a conversation with, I think, before, is that there are very few people, men or women, that are in any kind of a movie, it is a movie, any kind of a movement that really care about the work. And yes, we make mistakes, and hopefully we learn from them, but we care about the work. And our egos have to be in check all the time. Like, are you making a move or trying to influence somebody else because of your own ego? Are you trying to get to this idea of a hierarchy, this very it's like the male gaze in films or anything, this male idea of hierarchies, keeping other people like this rather than seeing equals and that we have different skills, and how do we join? That's where I'm coming from. I'm using whatever ego that I do have to try to influence that. And I think that there, unfortunately, throughout history, there have always been individuals. They want to be on top. Mm-hmm. They really want only their vision. And if others within that same place have a different vision about how some goal is going to be accomplished, they can do what they're going to do. I'm not going to stop them. And I would hope that we would respect each other and figure out, how does that happen? And how do we reach these goals? So can I get a witness? Is really, like I said, hey, can I get a witness here? This woman just got fired. This woman just got canceled from something. this woman is speaking about something that sounds really kind of uncomfortable. What do I do with that what she's saying? But we're on the same side. That's what Can I Get a Witness can incorporate all that. And that's what took me to the challenge of going to the Netflix supposed walkout from employees.
Yeah, and something you brought up was people coming from different sides of, conservative, liberal, Christian, atheist, straight, gay, whatever, coming together for a common goal.
Yeah.
And we see this in different kind of topics that are coming up right now, but specifically with the children. I mean, most people can get behind safeguarding children and not letting, the fact that you are a very out dyke feminist and that you're able to bring together these very normal parents, like anybody that you would see pushing a cart in the grocery store. Maybe they go to church on Sunday and they just do their book club, and they live a very suburban, normal American life, and they're able to come together with you, who's Joey Brite, unapologetic, and able to.
They're scared. And at least some of them, they're scared when the Zoom starts or whatever, right? We're going to do this thing. It's like, we've come together for this, and they're sort of looking like, what am I doing in this room?
Yeah.
And I can see it, and we'll address it. It's come up, and we'll address it. That I've been able to disarm people, though, because that's been my survival. I've been a jokester. I'm a color consultant. Like I said, I worked in the music world, and some people, like, they've been referred to me to help them with their careers, to sit down and look at their branding, and they're like, where did you come from? And it took me a while to establish that track record so that they could see what the results were for me working with other people. They maybe thought I was weird or something. It gets dissipated pretty quickly. And again, being a house painter, which has been my main profession for many years, walking into a wealthy home, where they never had any female come in their home that even looked like me or spoke like me or was so direct about their environment and asking them questions about how they use their environment, those kinds of sort of sociological that interest. I tend to disarm people pretty quickly. It's not some nefarious agenda. It's like, I have to prove myself all the time. I'm a human being. Stop, don't be thinking about what I'm doing in bed or what's going on with me anywhere else, and I was thinking when I was a young lesbian, and being out on dates or whatever. And this is, before they had any kind of protections for homosexuals, in workplaces. Having people blatantly say, well, I'm on a date, look at my girlfriend, look at me, and say, well, I know who's on top. What do you do? Or something, like that people would think they could say that stuff out loud. And I'd say, like, do you really think you need to be saying anything like this in public? Aren't you embarrassed? But if I did that, I could have had us both raped and beat up before we even left the restaurant, once we hit the pavement. That's something that a lot of these people, these parents that I speak with, these so-called younger and even, now middle-aged women that call themselves rad femmes, most of them are straight. They have no concept of being in that skin, literally being shot at. Many years ago, I saw your eyes go, woo. But seriously, being out on a date with an extremely attractive woman to the general population's idea of what's attractive, and being able to be out like that in public and literally getting chased, making the choice to run from my date because we've already planned ahead of time. It's like these protests. You plan ahead, you think of the worst scenarios. I build up to that in my workshops that I do in the sessions. We look at the physical location. That's part of the whole deal. We look at who's the audience we're about ready to walk into or where we're going to be. I've been doing that on dates for my whole life. Every time I've been in relationships, everywhere I've gone, every job I've had, everything, every job I couldn't get, every friend that I couldn't go visit at work because they would be fired if I went to have lunch with them and their people saw me.
Mhm.
And I know other women like that. These new feminists and these new rad femmes and these parents and these Christians and these right-wing people, blah, 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 that all this left-right talk and all that crap, I have only met less than a handful that understand that kind of oppression. When you add darker skin than what I have, take it up another 10 notches.
Mhm.
These are the friends, these are the people, these are the women that I've had in my life. That was what lesbian community was, in that having each other's backs. These new people coming along, we don't know if they have jobs, a lot of them. We don't know where they get their money. We don't know what do they have a track record? Did they just shave their head yesterday and join up with something and decide they were going to become leaders? These are the things that I'm always asking women, be very critical. And I ask it of the people, the parents and everything, when they have questions for me, and I say, ask me anything. If I think that it's rude, I'll tell you, but I'm not going to scream at you about it.
Mhm.
And I've had people hang on to Zooms after the group is over, and they wanted to talk to me personally and understand more about, what is it like to be a lesbian that got shot at? What is it like to be a lesbian just getting by in the world? Joey, you said you were in the trades. How I don't know any women that are plumbers, electricians, house painters, roofers, all the stuff that we all rely on.
Mhm.
And those businesses are fading. In terms, we know it's really hard to get somebody good in certain things, right?
Mhm.
So I think that a lot of any criticisms and anything working with people across the board, these parents some that are making a ton of money, the class differences are huge with us. The experiences are huge, religious feelings, political stuff, all of that cast aside. We cut to the chase. And what I have seen, Emily, that's really exciting is that a lot of these people that maybe never met a lesbian like me, or they say, I've never met a lesbian, Joey. And I always say, not that you know of.
Mhm.
It might be a woman that couldn't be out or tell you anything, or even show that as part of something that is part of who she is and who she's living within herself every day. What's been really exciting is people saying to me, I get it. I get that piece of maybe an argument that we had, or when I said, did you see that? Did you see how they just treated me compared to you? And I don't have to do that a lot anymore. I haven't for a number of years, or I have a lot of straight friends. And if they're really paying attention, especially when we're socializing and other people treat them in a certain way that they've never been treated before when they're around me, they say, I get it. I see what you're talking about. And it's just like with race or class or anything else, that when we go, oh, I just had that experience. For me, it was having friends that were really literally physically disabled, with visibly having disabilities, with adaptive equipment, blind, deaf, and watching how other people like me, treat them on the sidewalks, in a meeting, at a restaurant, whatever. The different kinds of ways that we treat each other need to be examined a lot more if we're going to even make a movement like this not just function, but be successful over all the little battles that we have, all the things that we do win, because everything comes in small wins. If I skip over who you are as a person, Emily, I don't know anything about you, and this tension comes up between us, and we don't explore that, we're not going to be very successful in the long run. We're not going to be able to probably sustain that and survive it until we have a conversation about that. And then what do we do with that? How do we function as a movement? You can't be a movement without more understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we have a generational gap, but I think that the thing that both of you and I have had to deal with is everything's been happening online. Relationships, even pre-COVID, a lot of relationships, and the use of having an electronic device in our hands where we could readily, have things happen like that quickness, it has stifled the concept of patience. And understanding takes patience, and it takes vulnerability, and it takes risks. Because I say something to you and you're highly offended by something, maybe really offended, not because I called you the wrong pronoun, but really offended because I might have made an assumption about you. And it's something that really does affect your life. And you have people make that assumption all the time, and it's very hurtful. If you don't stop to tell me, can I talk to you about this thing that you just said or whatever? And I'd say, sure. I'm not going to know it about you. And I might do it again because you were too afraid or felt too intimidated to tell me how much that affected you. But that thing could affect if you and I are working on a project, and it's a project that we're probably going to be committed to for the next 2, 3, 5, 6 months, a year. If we don't deal with that elephant in the room, we're never going to get ahead.
You are listening to WLRN.
And that's what these people in the Zooms, we cover a lot of different kinds of things, and weird things come up and people get triggered by different things because we're talking about literally putting our bodies in a peaceful way in front of a very intense business that really doesn't want us there. And that's very different than other forms of protesting or resistance or anything like that.
Yeah, with technology, there is communication breakdowns, even though we're able to contact each other like that. And I wonder how different it is for you through your experience with activism. And I'm sure most of your meetings were face-to-face, maybe a little bit on the phone, but probably mostly actually being physically in a room with other people and having a discussion.
You mean my background?
Your background, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Zooms, I mean, it's kind of the closest that we have, and the best, I think probably the best thing about it is that you probably couldn't train these parents who are in LA and in Washington and in New York and et cetera without Zoom, or else you would be flying all over the place,
And who's going to fund me? Yeah, exactly. And then my hotel stays, and then renting out, as like I said, from the activism that I learned, especially with the animal rights activism, being able to be in a gymnasium all weekend. You used to be able to rent out or sign a form, to get like a high school gym on the weekend during times when they weren't doing sports, numbers of hours. There used to be in the union halls that if you knew somebody that was a union worker, where they could rent that hall for the day or the weekend and literally be in rooms with people who were your comrades in the same cause, but playing bad actors, doing a good job of playing bad actors as counter protesters, and literally being in the flesh with each other. And that makes a big difference. Like me talking with you now like this, I mean, I did have an advantage to be able to meet you finally. So there's more of a familiarity even with that when I talk to you now. Makes a huge difference than people just, talking overseas and whatever. But that in a room when you're being trained about this word that gets used so easily about triggers, being able to experience it, literally holding hands on either side of your body with men and women, and having people come at you as acting as a counter protester, screaming in your face. I cannot replicate that with you. I could maybe, after you and I've had a, relationship like this over a long time, and have a fight with each other about something, have a debate with each other about something. I mean, when I say fight, I mean, like we really get mad. I'm going to have to hang up, that kind of stuff. It takes a long time to get to that place to be able to say, okay, all right, let me see. All right, sorry. Let me figure out, okay, what did you do? What did I do? That stuff takes a while. To talk about the possibility of physical violence, a verbal assault could be nonstop, where you have to leave the situation. That is nearly impossible to replicate in a room, in a Zoom meeting with 20 people who all want to get involved. They really care about what's going on with kids. They really want to stand in front of that hospital. And they're also holding this terror that sits on their shoulders like this of, oh my God, am I going to really get hurt? And hey, if I do, I'm going to be in the hospital for a while. Or, I mean, you talk about those things. You have no idea. I have no idea currently. Well, I do. I've been close enough to it, but most people don't. I cannot convey that. So I don't know anybody. There's one other young man that I've heard about, and I actually saw some of his session. His name is Max Wilbert. He's with DGR, the Deep Green Resistance Movement. He's the only other person besides the deprogrammer and myself, and she and I are the only ones that I know that understand this training, that have been physically attacked, that have been under fire, that have gone through mock, like when you do a mock courtroom trial, mock attack situations. It's rare, and it's an unusual skill or position to be in, I think, at this point of time in 2021. But that's what I wanted to offer, and that's what I thought maybe I could get started off. And my goal was to get big news to cover us, to get a big American news platform. I would have settled for freaking Russian TV at this point, but I managed to do it after all these protests in LA, the one you were at. Fox came and covered that. I feel like, okay, if I die tomorrow, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I look at the wins, I look at that stuff. And now to have a parent who's told me, yeah, I want to lead this. That's good. Okay, Joey, you don't want to do it? That's great. I'll do it. I said, you take it. It's yours. And now if anybody gets hurt, what are they going to do? Come after me? I'll live with the pain of knowing that that person got hurt, no matter who, no matter what methods they're using, whatever. I never want anybody to get hurt with this. History tells us otherwise about how things go down, but so yeah, we're always taking risks no matter what we do. But I'm so happy to get to the point where I've got parents that want to be activists rather than wallowing in their pain and literally locking themselves in the bathroom in their house while their bullying teenagers are screaming at them on the other side of the door that they're going to kill themselves. And the mothers or fathers are in so much pain around this and feel like nobody listens to them.
Yeah. And in terms of protesting, there's a lot of theory, right? Like you brought up the nonviolent direct action, and even the theory that you go through with Can I Get a Witness, with how you're supposed to handle certain situations. And then there's reality. Then there's when you get on the pavement and the adrenaline's going, and sometimes you have people yelling at you or honking their horn, and we're all human, right? And sometimes there's situations that happen that not proud of. And that's what the debrief is for, and the learning and all of that. And getting back to kind of theory and different kinds of contexts and protests, right after the 3 Can I Get a Witness protests, like a few days later, you and a group of other women went down to the Netflix walkout. So how was that protest different from Can I Get a Witness, and all the thought and decisions around that?
That was a fast one, and it wasn't really a protest. So I do want to say that we all knew it was phony, that there weren't going to be like 1 million employees walking out. We were seeing these things of that was going to be virtual, and it was like, what the hell's going on? But I'll tell you what happened is that I have communications. I've set up different group communications with all the different cities that are either going to be protesting, have protested in the past, pop up again. And actively at that time of this Netflix thing, yes, we'd just come off of 2 protests on the West Coast on Friday, the 15th of October, Seattle and Los Angeles. Both of them were nice and big, but LA was big. And there were so many parents involved in that. And that happened. And in the same breath, up, way up the coast and into Seattle, there were other people that were protesting there. Both of these were the Can I Get a Witness things, yes. And when you're talking about that, we're talking about, like, I'd say a sponsorship in a way. I mean, I've invested a lot of money that I've never gotten back out of this. It has to do with signage. You have to think about all that stuff ahead of time. Los Angeles paid for their own signs, and I'm working with one mom in particular there, and we came up with new signage. That was going to be this fun thing about the 15th. So they're up in Seattle, and they create some of their own signs, and they're more radical than any of the groups, except for New York. I mean, in terms of that New York and that being led the way that was led, and my coexistence in that with the deprogrammer in terms of her artwork and her leadership. I mean, that's a whole thing. And that would be radical as well because of the signage that we were using. Mm-hmm. What I did with that situation is that with LA, I'm even talking about protests and how things are run. When you have imagery that is insightful in this way, some people say it's insightful, and it's provocative, it's radical, whatever words people want to use. Yeah, we had images of double mastectomy. And what we did at the Children's Hospital Los Angeles was show the particular surgeon that is there, that it's who she's dealing with the whole gender affirmation. That's all that it is, gender affirmation, surgical and drug procedures and things like that. Is Johanna Olsen Kennedy. We had a big poster with her smiling, and then what she does for money with dollar signs in the eyes. Mm-hmm. That's provocative. That's a statement all in and of itself. There wasn't a particular doctor or surgeon that was targeted in Seattle, but that doesn't mean that's not going to happen in the future. And the next protest that happens is definitely targeting in language and visuals the place that they're going to be, protesting. So we came off of the two on the West Coast on Friday the 15th and the one in New York. These were all very successful. How do I know that? Again, feedback, looking at the retweets on Twitter. I said, Twitter isn't real, but then the real people that are on there and do care, sharing the content, talking about this stuff, arguments again within this. Again, it's not just one community. Oh, should they have used double mastectomy? I don't even want to pay that any mind at this point, because a philosophy of myself and a philosophy that I've brought into the business is talking all about that, thinking about that way ahead of time. If I have anybody now that comes in and they want to do a protest, they need to know that that is a philosophy that I believe that provocative images, for me, change way more many people, has a much bigger effect. It's going to get spread around a lot more, and more people are going to learn about, even if they hate that image, they're going to learn about the protests. Mm-hmm. Again, I've always said this, it's not about, is it right, is it wrong? People have different opinions about that. As someone who's been studying and working in advertising for years, that makes the impact that I'm looking for is eyeballs. How many eyeballs are on this? Even if they don't want to see that. So that was very successful. And I was so that was a Sunday the 17th in New York. Normally I would have set up a debrief for Wednesday evening, I think I was talking about at the time, to start going over, and talking with all these cities. And, Monday is just kind of catching up and getting back into life and getting back into work and all that. And Tuesday morning hit. I was literally ready to get on my computer, set up some options for debriefs. And what happened was that one of the women who was one of the original protesters in Los Angeles, who's in this group that I set up the communication for everybody in Los Angeles, she posted the link to what was going to happen the next day in Hollywood, was this, Netflix employee walkout. And the image that she had, and it was Dave Chappelle and all this stuff. And she posted and said, "Dare we?" with a question mark, "Dare we?" And that was what I saw. And immediately my brain, I knew, because she's an Angelino, I'm a former Angelino. There's another woman in there who's an Angelino who happens to work in the publication business.
What's Angelino?
Angelino is being from LA.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Well, like somebody says a Brooklynder, or they might have other kinds of, dialects for different parts of Brooklyn where they're from. You say I'm a Rican if you're, Puerto Rican, yeah, stuff. I'm an Angelino.
Mhm.
Angelina is what, if you want to get it right, don't be misgendering me. Anyway, you say Angelinos, and us three Angelinos, the minute we saw that, we knew right away that is a massive international press circus. There's going to be TRAs, there's going to be and TRAs though that are professional, like professional. I don't mean professional, I like Antifa, meanies that go get you, although they did show up later. It was going to be a circus. We knew it was going to be a media circus, and that we had this imperfect character named Dave Chappelle in the show that he did. And one of the things that I have found in this doing of the protests and everything, a little bit of an aside, but most of us on the surface anyway, a lot of people say we believe in free speech.
Mhm.
So you and I could have a massively different opinion about how to approach something or what you believe in actually. I would never, unless I'm talking directly to your face and I say, Emily, that thing you want to do is so dangerous to me. Can we talk about it? Can we explore this? Because I've kind of been doing this longer than you have, and I'm a little bit worried. I want you to do your thing, but will you hear me out?
Mhm.
If I didn't like what you were doing, that is how I would approach you. That is how I would do that. I would hope that as much of an open mind, and I could be really passionate, really pissed off about it, already decide, oh shit, there's nothing that she can talk her way out of this with me. There's nothing that I could possibly see. I go back to the patience, the conversation, and the basic, I'm opening my hands. I want to understand why you're doing this thing. That is what it takes for us to move through this next scenario that I'm going to say. And the other thing I would add on, but it's about Netflix, I would never go behind your back and try to get other people to go against you and see you as something that's a problem
Mhm.
in any way, shape, or form. Again, because if I take your right away, that if I do that or try to wield influence somehow, or I think I'm more popular and I got more fans than you do or whatever, I am in fact trying to silence you in something that I may not disagree with, but I'm not doing anything different than the ones that we're fighting, the ones that we fight against. So with the Netflix thing, we had built in 3 women in that conversation, and then a 4th one who was also an Angelino, who knows about publicity, who understands optics, who looks at this stuff. There were 4 of us there, and I called a friend of mine and said, you want to come down? All of this happened within 24 hours. It was like from the moment I said, I'll get on a plane and I'll be down there. All I could think about is, what credit card can I break into? How am I going to make this happen? And what happened with that, the discussions that we had, was that mom who originated this idea and put out the dare we, she immediately thought, okay, we're going to bring our signs from the clinics. And she said that, and I said, no, there's no way that this is we're not going to be heard on this. So my PR brain kicked in, and she said, well, what do you want to do? I said, this is about free speech. We don't have to rah, 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 Dave Chappelle is the greatest guy in the world. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with being able to, just like with J.K. Rowling, there's a lot of stuff that J.K. Rowling said that absolutely infuriated me, because she believes that there's such a thing, I guess. Again, I haven't had a personal relationship with her, but everything that she wrote about looked like she actually believes that this identity, this fake identity, actually exists. I don't know what she thinks about non-binary or any of that, but none of it exists to me. She said so many things that just upset me so much about that. But guess what? Again, an imperfect ally in a way. And sometimes in tiny movements, like we are, in tiny belief systems that are growing, and people realize this is a big lie. We're being surrounded by and compelled to believe in this big, gigantic lie at my job, at my kids' school. So we knew this was this opportunity, a handful of us. And then it turns out there's 5 of us. I say, I think it's free speech. We got to go with that. Immediately she went, you're right. You're right. That's great. I said, why don't you come up with some slogans? Definitely one of the signs, at least one of the signs has to be hashtag Team Turf, because that was related to Chappelle and why he got screamed at.
Mhm.
See, I don't think I've seen the special. My own thing was, it wasn't about the content of everything that he said. Not all of it. The fact all he did was he brought up J.K. Rowling's name, that he agreed with her. He did the big boo-boo that we all know, which is to conflate gender with sex. We wish these so-called allies would start to get it right.
Yeah.
And the fact that he said Team Turf, that was it. Now we're boiled down to what, in the advertising world, where you come with the tag. You come with the tag, sticks in people's brains. So this idea that these men's rights activists, which is all that they are, need to protect that. We saw after that happened with Chappelle, the spin doctoring that went into CNN and all of the big networks, MSNBC, everybody pulling out the stops, pulling out mostly all these men of color who think that they're women to be spokespeople. Predominantly, that was it. Men in dresses, with different skin colors, but hey, the ones with darker skin, that gives me more of the, more credence for what I'm trying to promote. So we did private texting with each other. We were working out strategy. Of the 5 women, there were 2-3 of us that were talking about this the most. When we physically met in person the next morning, because it was a journey to even make the plane arrangements, get there, the babysitting arrangements, school for some, all this stuff. When we got there, any differences that we had, and there were some differences among us personally and other things, right off the bat, it was like we were one. And we said things out loud, like, no matter what happens here, we got each other's backs. What is this that we're getting into? We start talking. Literally, it was like that. It was that quickly. We saw the signage that the main, leader in terms of that and making the messages that we had worked out. She had them ready. It was a beautiful thing. And when we went an hour early. We stood across the street. We started looking at the whole scenario. I know what a press junket looks like. I know what a whole fake staged scene for television looks like and for the news cameras. And we saw that starting to develop. And another woman in our group looked at me and said, Joey, you want to go check it out? So the 3 stayed behind. 2 of us went to scout it out. And I mean, physically, the building, where entrances, where exits, what's going on with security guards, who's coming here and all that. In the course of just even 5 minutes that she and I were walking around with no signs or anything, we're just looking, we could see what was starting to happen. One ride on demand car after the next, with reporters getting out, some with cameras, a lot with audio, it was going to be radio. And then big ABC, NBC, CBS. I kept waiting for the Access Hollywood and the Entertainment Tonight. I never did see those. But we saw this happening, and she and I looked at each other and said, we got to move really quickly. This is like, they're going to be here. We're probably the only ones that are here to support free speech and want to support Dave Chappelle. All of us had good speaking points. We were ready to go for just about anything. One of my comrades, her whole angle was going to be a lot of LGB stuff. Mine was going to be, how do we get from free speech to this ideology to being able to talk about kids being mutilated? A lot of people can't do that. Again, that's like experience. That is not being afraid of having a camera on your face and just, spitting this out. So the 2 of us walked back over across the street to the rest of our team. One of them had gone and done something and broken one of my basic rules for my normal protest, which is don't get coffee right before the thing's going to start. He had gone off to get some coffee. And we were like, okay, we got to take some of the signs. We're going to go right back across the street. We're going to be standing right there. When you guys come, we're a solid, just like we are at the protests in front of the clinics, stoic, carrying signs, smiling at times, depending on what's going on, and just be there and then get ready for interviews. And that is exactly what happens. The moment that my team member with me, we literally looked at each other. It was this weird thing, Emily, where it was like we knew. The moment we put our signs and I started holding up a sign, cameras came out of everywhere. Click, 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 click. It's like you're on the, like you're kind of on the, it's a press junket. And then immediately we are getting all this attention. There's just the two of us. We start getting interviewed. We get interviewed as a duo. They're separating us. She's got a different message than I do, but we're together. Turn back to back. It went bam, bam, bam. And then finally our people, two of the people came. Now, four of us, we go back into sort of this formation. We're standing there. We're not being individually interviewed anymore. Cameras are going off. And then the fifth one comes. We got photographed all over. People are starting to want to talk to all of us. You could see all of the all the phony, narrative that's being built. And we could see this, and we're even talking about it. All of a sudden, we haven't even gotten into any chanting yet. And we had all agreed, this is going to kind of be a free-for-all. Let's stay kind of close together. Let's keep eyes. Let's do whatever. We've got one person in our group who's doing live streaming. She's got a lot of followers. And all of a sudden, these guys show up with huge sticks, with things that say, I love jokes. Dave is funny. I think they had a third one or whatever when they flipped the sign around, and they come on like goofballs. We love jokes. We love jokes. And we're just like beaming and smiling and going, this is hysterical, because we know they're not feminists. They're not there with the same thing, but they were there for free speech. That's what their message was. That's where the building of bridges happens with the parents and all the stuff we're talking about. It doesn't matter what our politics are. Doesn't matter who anybody's having sex with. Doesn't matter what's going on with our families. We're there for free speech. Free speech, talking about that, can give us the avenue to talk about a lot of other things. And, we talked to those guys. And I knew the minute they were there, that was it for us. No matter what had been photographed of us, no matter what interviews or anything we had, we were just going to hope for the best. We knew we'd done a lot of international press at that point, but it all became about the comedians until we are really like, we were in a group and already the men's rights activists literally standing in front of us and trying to be taller. There's a big tall guy you'll see in some of this. It has black trans lives matter. And they started chanting, trying to overrun any interviews that we were doing right there with press, where they would have to turn off they had to turn off the machine sometime and say, we'll have to carry this on over there or something, or I'll have to come back to you later. They were disruptors. And the other thing that they started doing was, even between us, and this is an age-old tactic, and some new people don't know this, is that you can be, if you had been there, Emily, and you were having a discussion with somebody in there and you're like, but that's not how we're doing it, or that's what, and you're moving your hands like this and you're talking to somebody, and then they have one of their buddies or something, they come in between and they go, they go like this. I'm doing this in the camera. They spread their arms and they act like you're a dangerous person. They're facing you and they're protecting the one behind them from you, but they'll do this between you and your own comrades. And a woman did that between myself and a comrade. We were trying to hear each other. We were trying to figure out, what's the next thing? Where are you going to go? What am I going to do? And this woman got between us all of a sudden and did this. And she was doing it to me. I barely moved back. Myself in that moment, and me yelling at her yelling at me. My comrade behind her, who was yelling at her, saying, how dare you, and all that. Other moments where the women I was with, if I had been a photographer sent there to try to catch the mean feminists, the TERFs, I could have taken at least 20 pictures of each of my comrades looking like they either were about to get into a physical fight, or they were going like this. They were backing off. People that were grabbing at our hands when we didn't even have anything sometimes. I never felt comfortable pulling out my camera, barely my phone, because they were trying to always, this stuff's going on. And again, not being like really physically violent, we had this man who was the size of 6'5" or so. Everybody was telling me he looked like something out of Rocky Horror Picture Show. He was really a character, but he was verbally harassing us for almost 90 minutes. It had been going for like an hour, saying all these really obnoxious things. And we always stayed within eyeball of each other, but we had moments. You ask about the planning ahead, it was like, basically we said, we trust each other. We've got each other's backs. This is a free-for-all that's like a rare situation that we don't know everything that's going to happen, but the goal that we have as individuals and as a group, we're going to peak as many people as we can. That's it. We're going to all speak from our own passions about what's going on and everything. And that's what we did. And I have no fault with any of the women that I was with that day. This incident, which turned into a photograph, again, we managed to get press there. Specifically, there was a publication called the Epoch Times that said, we want to cover this. They're working on a clinic article, but that hasn't come out yet because this Chappelle thing eclipsed those protests that we had just done on that weekend. The debriefs, the follow-up, the fodder to be created from them. Everything about that ended up being this, and it really eats up a lot of, energy and everything. But there was this incident that occurred that nobody could have planned. And it was that we were all doing our own thing for moments, again, separated maybe by 50 feet or something like that apart from each other. There was a reporter that had wanted to speak with me. It was another Italian guy. I ended up talking like two different Italian ones. We ended up talking to over 9 representatives of journalism from 9 different countries that I counted. Radio, some TV, and some just writing. And one of my colleagues, I didn't consciously recognize that it was her voice, but I was chasing after this reporter to talk with him. And I wanted to give him my number. And as I was walking towards him, I heard a yelp. And I knew that it was familiar, but I couldn't tell where it was from. And when I turned and I completely abandoned reaching for that, reaching out to that guy, I just consciously ran. And I saw one of my comrades. I recognized her legs, kind of like a sandpiper running underneath these bushes. I could see some of that. And I just ran to her to meet her on that walkway because I thought somebody had hurt her. I thought that was her. I thought she'd been hurt. And, and it turns out it was the mom of our group who we all feel really protective of whenever these protests happens. It's something that a lot of us just feel like, mama bears around. Like that's who, we feel for. And she was kind of out of breath. She'd been running and I said, are you okay? Did anybody hurt? She said, he got our sign, Joe, he got our sign. We need our sign. And I was like, phew. And I took off and it was an alleyway that was kind of between 2 of the buildings. This is a gorgeous facility. This Netflix thing is brand new. We're talking glass buildings everywhere. And being formerly from Los Angeles and now up in the Bay Area, I always think about earthquakes. And it was ridiculous. I was telling somebody later that the whole time we were there, I'm thinking, great, we're going to have an earthquake. And we're all going to get shattered with glass. It's like, gee, it's a beautiful building, but we're all going to die. But after I saw her face, I heard her voice. I know she was pissed off and she was really shaken because what any of those signs meant, it wasn't about this piece of paper. It wasn't about a physical thing. It wasn't like someone took off in a Jaguar that we owned or something. She was really upset. It upset her to the core. And I thought, okay, how can this be that hard? He has unzipped his platform shoes a little bit. He's having a hard time running. He's laughing at her and laughing at us. I noticed that there are tons of photographers in this area. There are people on the other side over there, more men's rights activists like him on the other side. Again, there had been no physical violence. And I go running after him. I take my sign off and I'm going, saying all this, give us our sign back, and all this stuff. And I'm like a midget. I was like a flea.
Mhm.
you know, compared to this guy. And I had jumped up twice to try to grab the sign off of, you know, just grab the sign without making any contact with him. And I made this decision and I saw cameras start going and I went, okay. And I leapt up to get the sign again, like in a third attempt, because he had already moved it back and forth. He was just having a good time laughing at me, turning around, you know, and taunting and all that. And I really made a leap, and to not slam into him, I reached up and I thought I could pull his arm, and I was yelling at my comrade, you know, grab the sign, I was telling her. And I reached up and he just kind of went, "Eek." You know, it was like nothing for him. I think about these, you know, the men and women sports and what they're talking about. And again, he's laughing at me. He goes, "Oh, my shoes are loose." You know, people started laughing. We turned it into this kind of, I said, "Gee, do you think this is a man? You're like 10 feet tall. Like, what's going on? Am I really this short?" You know, everybody's laughing. The photographers are going. And that was it, you know. And I said, "You're too good. I can't." I let it go, you know, I let the idea go and everything. And I was leaning over and I said some stuff to him to really piss him off, but he assessed the situation. He folded the sign and he went off, and then he opened it up and he was and everybody was cheering him on the other side. And I was like, damn it, you know. And I'm apologizing to the mom, and she's like, you know, "I'm glad you're okay," and all that, and blah, blah, blah. And 30 minutes later, she's retrieved the sign. She shows me. He had it under his foot. He was crushing it under his foot somewhere. And he took his eyes off of it and his foot off of it. And she was watching the whole time. She was so mad. And she went and got it again. And I was laughing. I said, "Well, that's great for you." And in that moment, I turned around. He was coming at her again. And I got in between and I pushed him off. And I said, "Stay off of us, you know, stay away." Where were we? All the cameras start turning on us in that moment. He looked like he was super mad. And I was like, I was pretty much ready for it. I knew it. I knew it. And, you know, my hands are off. And he assessed it and he went, "Nah, damn it. You know, I'm not going to do this either." He could have pounced on me. I would have done that for the cameras, honestly. And that's where I knew. I didn't plan to go there to do that. That's just something, like I said, we all went like we weren't sure. But then the idiots started yelling and screaming all these stupid things. Like I find out that Jill Soloway is, you know, doing her whole, this is like the Jews in the Holocaust. She's been railed on now. But that's what happened. And in that moment, it was interesting because the Epoch Times came to cover that. They sent a photographer. He'd been watching me. I happened to have a t-shirt on to help promote ideas, Jennifer Billick's 11th Hour blog. I was talking in interviews about Gender Mapper. I was trying to get people, you know, all of this stuff. We went there for free speech. Under the auspices of that, all 5 of us piqued thousands of people because, again, I got contacted by an Italian reporter days later for radio, gave him a 2-hour interview. I'll never hear that. I had a comedy screenwriter who's one of my clients in LA call me as I was ready to take back my rental car, and called me. And we haven't spoken for months. And he called me up and said, "I just heard you on the radio." I said, "In LA? On the radio in LA?" And I know he doesn't listen to like conservative radio. He said, "I can't believe it, Joey. It was amazing. I've seen all the pictures you're doing and this and that, but I heard you talk about that." I said, "Did I come off half decent?" He's like, "You were articulate, you were passionate, but you were very clear in your message. I cannot believe that they put you, you know, that somebody did that." And most of the reporters that I talked with, and I spoke with my colleagues about that, and a lot of them were like, "Yeah, they didn't necessarily hear that, or one did." And it was like this mishmash. Reporters that said to us after they turned off the mic, "I'm so glad you're here. My boss, my employer wants me to get a balanced story," they would say. "So I have to go off and talk to, you know, Cuckoo Head with the tambourine. And I wish that I could talk to you more. And I'm really glad you were here." Reporters rolling their eyes, turning stuff off and saying, "What insanity has this come to? And what brought you here? Like, why are you here?" And, "Oh, We were literally the only 5, and all of us women. And in all the people that we talked to, I didn't have one person, I think maybe a couple of my colleagues did, who came up and said, like a normal person that said, I'm just a housewife, I'm a lesbian, I'm a father, I'm a teacher, and I believe what you believe. Nobody did that I know, but I think a couple of my colleagues experienced that, but the reporters did, because that's what I was having contact with. So like I said, any one of my colleagues, a photo could have been taken of them looking like they just were ready to get in a fist fight, or they were just about to be hit by one of the opposition. And the optics in a situation like that, there's always backstory. And there's not one narrative that anybody can understand to try to attach something to somebody. So I think that, when we see stuff, whether it's a sports thing or it's a political event, and you just go, oh my God, that picture says 1,000 words. I immediately started getting an outpouring of thank you. Are you okay? Oh my God, that guy looked horrible. Are you okay? Wow. I'm glad you didn't get hurt. That's an amazing image, and it encapsulates like all the stuff that we're dealing with. Thank you so much. All that. Anybody that wants to make anything else of that, and that, oh my God, look at this message, I mean, there's one person that I heard started this narrative where she said, it's clearly that it looks like you're assaulting, and they stuck to these legality issues. And it was like, these people don't know. They haven't been in these situations. Again, press circus, Hollywood, extremely rare, where everybody's looking for certain stories and what they're going to do. And when you know to take an opportunity and turn it into something that will hopefully start the conversation. And I said, that's what Can I Get a Witness was about, starting the conversation for a lot of people and making them realize that they weren't alone. Anytime you see something that you think is weird, you may not like that person, you may not like the way they look, something about them. Substitute different people that you do know with that image. How would you feel if that was, somebody else? Different skin color, different age, different look, long hair, short hair, all the optics. And what ends up with that is that you get a very different perspective about, well, then who am I listening to? And why am I listening to this person? And what is this? Because guerrilla theater, street theater, which I got into very well at one point with one of my colleagues, where we started yelling money, money. Every time they said trans lives matter, I started out spontaneously with money, money, money. Then I started pointing at them, money, money, money. My colleague joined in, then my other colleague, 3 of us were yelling money, money, money. It's all about the money. And we started this thing, which is hardly seen. Is it provocative? Of course it is. Did we feel like we were probably safe enough to do that? Of course we did. And my colleagues, even more than me, when they were able to have screaming fights with these guys in front of, more than 100 people that were watching everything all over the place, and security all over the place, to be able to yell, you are a man. Everybody knows you're a man, you're a man, you're a man. One of my colleagues just started singing this thing that was from, I knew that I had heard Julia Long sing it, and she has informed me that it's an American woman that did this whole thing. If a person has a penis, he's a man, right? You might have heard that. I didn't think about that. She did that. She started doing that, and she did it right at some guy that was looked like he was 7 feet tall, who was looking so pissed. He could have brought his poster that he was carrying around and banged it right on her head. If he had, she's an adult. She knew exactly what she was doing. We would have taken her to the hospital if we had to. There were people all over the place. And then, oh, there's that image, right? There's that image. How many images does it take of women getting beat up? How many stories do we have to hear of women being raped in the prisons by men? How many stories does it have to take of parents, again, who are screaming and crying and feel like they're on their own? while they're going through a divorce because their partner is affirming their 7-year-old boy to turn into another Jazz Jennings, knowing that they are destroying their endocrine system and all kinds of things, while girls are just can't wait to get the money or turn 18. In some states, California, they can be, doesn't matter the age anymore. How many of that kind of destruction and the images do we have to have, I would say, of double mastectomies that we hold up at the clinics before people say, this is horrible. This needs to be stopped. There's all kinds of different awful images. So I'm very proud that the women that I was with that day and that we performed guerrilla theater, none of us got physically hurt, but we checked in with each other and we knew when we had to leave because we were sober, awake, we were bonded, we cared about each other. We knew that we had already done a tremendous amount of work. And when it looked like Antifa was starting to show up, we went, looked at our watches and said, time to go. And when we left is when all of this destruction started to happen. Sounds like it was within 15, 20 minutes. So we might have been there. They maybe would have started hitting us, but there were other people that they had to go after. And that's where all the attention went, right? It was the destruction of the sign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one got his head bashed in.
And his friend, I'm really concerned about his friend Rick. I mean, he's a week later talking like he's got cotton in his head. But what that's done is it has piqued 2 more men and all of the males that watch them on their YouTube channels that they have. And it's got the conversation going. I mean, Dave did what he did, an imperfect ally. And we got to get a lot of our messaging out. And if I had to do it all over again, I would have made a big stink with Jill Soloway. Had I known it was her, I didn't even recognize it was her. She screamed at me. I screamed at her. She was screaming at all of us, TERFs. That was Jill Soloway, who now goes by Joey Soloway, yelling at us. And if I had known, because she's a star, she's an entity, she's a known popular girl in that industry, not a girl anymore, apparently non-binary, so she's nothing. She's such a woman, you just look at her, it's like, give me a break. I would have started, definitely, I would have used that opportunity to get into an argument with her and accuse her of helping to unleash this fetish on the streets. These men who have normalized the idea that we can now have an assistant secretary of health in our government who goes out and reads stories to children, who used to work at a hospital that we have now, protested at Mount Sinai in New York.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know I've given you very long answers, and I appreciate that you can let me go on this route, because these long form interviews, while they turn off a lot of people, they turn on a lot of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And, the thing is, again, I've just been inundated with, like I said, getting reporters after the fact, the stimulation of this kind of, wow, it really does feel, in all the years that I've been fighting this, Emiliann, is that it really feels like this is one of those turning points where what I've been waiting for in terms of the general public starting to go, wait, what? That wait, what is, this is just another moment, but it's kind of got a nice, rippling effect. And we need the J.K. Rowlings to do what they did. We need Dave Chappelle's. We need people with these really large platforms to say even what I would consider the smallest thing, because we see the outrage of where they are failing and where they are panicking to hold on to this agenda that they're shoving down all of our throats. Again, no matter what our differences are, they're shoving this all down all of our throats. And at this point, like I said, in my life and in my time, I'm with the parents. I'm with the kids, in that those kids that normally would grow up to be either lesbian or gay or bisexual don't get to have that experience. They're not going to get to have that experience.
It's a huge issue, and that there are different ways to go about it. There's different tactics, like even the stark difference between it just in a week's time between the can I get a witness, like very stoic, and if somebody grabs your sign, you just leave it and you're not going to fight with anybody. And then going to the Netflix thing and just being, it's like you're kind of putting on a show, more or less. You're going to get into the fray a bit more. That there are different strategies and ways to pique people, you know.
You brought that up in terms of, it is a safety issue. The thing around, if somebody came and grabbed your sign, I'll tell you right then, probably the protest is going to end. People go, well, why would you going to do that? And I've had arguments about some of the safety things that I have like that. I don't know, but I know damn well, Emily, if you're there and somebody came and grabbed your sign and ran off with it, that probably a guy, it could be a teenage girl, they're protecting their religion. They could be running off to go get more people. And that's when people go, oh, that's what you were thinking of. It doesn't mean that I was right. It doesn't mean they were going to do it, but I want to err on the safe side. That's why I don't want anybody high or drunk or hungover or, anything when they come to these things. Really clear-headed, because this is not just us and our personal goal. It's a team. And if somebody comes and takes a sign like that, you let it go. At that point, that's a piece of paper, whatever. We have to disassemble, break down. We're not there to try to prove that we're tougher than anybody, So it is about that. Yeah, that's about safety. And that's a basic thing. And that's a very different way to show resistance to somebody, just like anybody that's running around doing stickering or spray painting or, whatever. Could they get caught? Sure. We just saw one of our own, have this horrible, stupid thing happen to her, and they threw the case out. Stickering in her town. But for me, stickering, that's one way. And I think it's a great form of resistance, but it's very minimal. If everybody in the world was doing it, I know we try to encourage it. But for me, I'm looking out for a way bigger agenda. I want a much bigger audience than the town or the store or the whatever that I did. I'm looking at really creating a new movement. And I've got allies in this where we're looking at behind the scenes. How do we actually make this something that reaches, as you said, Emily, the common person, Joe and Jane, Debbie and Frank, the moms, the not moms, the guys that are fathers, the ones that are going, waking all people up. That means crossing those bridges that we were talking about earlier, making alliances, some that aren't necessarily perfect. They are imperfect. And they try to weaponize money, and they try to create new narratives. I already know. I just recently saw the update on what the TRAs are writing about me. Can I get a witness? Did you know that I got money, I think, from these right wingers and all this heritage and what? I'm like, really?
You got it from Fox News.
Hey, great. Can you pay my rent this month?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm as common as people get, working class, in the trades. Come on. The autodidacts of the world, I figure, and as somebody had said to me, it's the tiny women of the world that are going to finally, bring this thing down or something. I know it's a joke, but yeah. So I wanted to say that because this whole thing with the sign, and I know because of taking you through the training, and there are always new things to bring up about, like I said, each of the protests that happen. There's nothing that's perfect about it. There isn't anybody that's going to come along out of the blue and be able to initiate something with the kinds of safety levels that I know a deprogrammer and I have. And there are others that have told me they don't want to come out. They could do it too. They don't want to come out. And everybody that I know that was really good in the animal rights movement, they're all TWAW people. They think I'm crazy. They think I'm a bigot, is what they think. Had I stayed in that movement, they probably would have put me in a dangerous situation. That's the thing about sacrificing your own, right? It gets to that. It gets to that. And I think we're at this point now in this growing ideology that we have and that we're looking at about protecting each other, protecting the rights and safeguarding children and women's spaces. A lot of women are eating their own. And there are new people coming up like Karen Davis, who's got you're kidding, right? Comes out of nowhere. She's been at it now for a year, and we've seen her actual like therapy process with her realizing, and she
I
admits it.
remember her first videos. She was like screaming at the camera. I'm like, who is this lady?
She's a disruptor, and that we need
Mhm.
disruptors like that.
Yeah.
Not always perfect. She doesn't say she is.
Mhm.
But the fact is, she's criticizing people within this so-called, again, this movement with the air quotes around it. She's disrupting things. She doesn't always say things like, oh my God, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm not going to shut her down, and I'm not going to go around behind somebody's back and say, I don't, unsubscribe from her YouTube.
Yeah.
I don't like her videos, and if I see you did, you're my enemy now.
Yeah. Yeah, we got to celebrate the different voices and different points of view, and that we all have different ways of thinking and speaking. And I mean, don't want to detract too much, but Megan Murphy comes to mind, how her opinions have evolved over time, and she's been very public about that. And Megan Murphy was huge for me in the beginning. Like, I binge listened to her Feminist Current podcast.
Fabulous.
And I don't agree with everything she says, but I love watching her be herself. That's it's authenticity. It's not, oh, I have my image to uphold and I must always speak the right feminist speaking points, So I like to see diversity in the movement. And how are we going to get diversity in the movement if we're saying good, bad all the time,
Well, going back to Karen Davis, she's the only one. It's not like I'm dying to, come out and try to rail Megan. I could. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Karen decided to do something very specifically.
She did.
Every right to do that. She should have the voice, and no one should be trying to silence her about doing that. If she steps into legal territory that really does become defamation, which any of us have to be careful of, when you've really damaged, somebody, when you create a smear campaign, or you try to have you're on a mission repeatedly to try to shut down somebody's voice out of conferences, out of, protest situations, out of teaching positions or whatever, that's a problem. That's a really serious problem. So, yeah. And Karen, also, the good thing about her, she's got a lot of humor.
Mm-hmm.
Some people got mad because she made up a song, that was connected to the Megan Murphy thing. I thought it was hysterical. And it's kind of like the thing with Dave Chappelle. One of the signs that we had at Netflix was learn to laugh at yourself. That was right next to, Team Turf for a while. And then when I was carrying the Netflix, don't cancel and all that, and mine was the truth is not transphobic. Normally I wouldn't even use that word, and I didn't make that sign, but I thought that was appropriate for the people that were going to be there, for the language. And if this was going to go all over the world in any way, which it has now in publications, people understand that language. Again, I don't like it. It's imperfect, but I'll be damned if I do that in my personal life. And even like Rex Landy had said, what a fabulous woman she is. If you choose, you say you have trans people in your family, or they've been in your life for a long time or whatever, we all make those choices in our personal lives. Any of the very effeminate gay men that I used to help protect and defend at times because they were super that way, they would protect me. These are personal, way back, long ago relationships. We used to joke around. They'd call me boy. I'd call them girl. That stuff is so way gone now. But I understand it because I lived it. None of those men ever thought that they were really women and tried to force on the public and all of their people. It's a whole different thing we're dealing with now. And I think if you want to, though, and you have a friend like that, you've got some AGP who wants to, be referred to as a woman, that's your business. But the minute that you and I step out to the job site, or we're out in public, or we're even in our, political movement, no, I'm not going to refer to him like that. That's like the personal's back here. It's kind of like the bedroom door. You shut the bedroom door. People are so used to having every aspect of their lives, even their body parts, on display to the world on a screen. We've lost, it's something that Jennifer talked about, Billick, about this idea of privacy. What's happened with privacy, and what does privacy bring about? It doesn't matter right or wrong. We all have different senses of what is decent. What are boundaries that I feel if I tell my friend who says, Joey, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. Don't talk like that. Whether it's about sexuality or race or, jokes or anything like that. Don't do that. It's kind of like we've lost that, any sense of boundaries at all. And I mean, you brought that up about Megan, I find it really interesting. And the one thing I would say, because I like her, that doesn't matter. There are a lot of people that don't like. I think she's one of the funniest writers when she does it, when she writes funny. But the fact that this is a woman who, has been this, like, for you and you're younger, and Megan Murphy is like, there's the feminist movement. She's not even an American, right? But that's the feminist movement. And we've, want to import her and have her come here and speak, from Canada. And now she's living in Mexico. It doesn't matter. She's a Canadian, and that she's gone from representing that to then having different things go on in her life that has brought her to the place where she's criticizing this radical feminist thing. And I agree with a lot of the things that she said, by the way, in this article that she wrote. But to then taking it to this extreme where she's got literally a t-shirt on as a heterosexual woman, someone has gifted her with a t-shirt that says ball palmer. And she's just laughing and mocking, looking at the camera and pointing like, I'm a ball palmer. You can laugh at that, but go, girl, really? Like, really? Okay. I would not try to cancel her. I wouldn't go around saying, see that image? I know you tweeted that. You have it on your Facebook. That could really screw up the whole women's movement. Could you take it down? It's really not a good message.
I could just see her response too. Like, fuck you.
And I would defend her doing that, period.
Yeah.
And the thing is, this idea of optics and going back to Netflix and then this, movement and protests and all that stuff is that, again, that in January of 2019, when Posey, AKA Kelly J, came to the United States with Julia Long, and they were kind of running around in the state capitol, in DC, and they're scooting around in there, and they just happened upon an open door where Sarah McBride, I don't even know what that guy's real name is, who is doing this disgusting erasure of woman, of the concept of woman. They happened to take an opportunity. They didn't plan that. And they both went in and started recording and started going after him. He never picked his head up to even look at them. You see him being riddled with question after question. That's all very antagonistic. And it needed to happen. And what happened? You've got these self-appointed grand poobahs, of the women's movement over there in the UK saying, oh, bad optics. Don't do that. We don't do that. That looks really bad. You're making us look bad. And it's never stopped. These same women still get railed upon. There are literally fewer than a dozen, I'd say a handful of us here in the United States, in this very big country, who get treated that same way. And I talked about this with Julian Vigo a few months ago. Is it class? Is it education? Is it the fact that if somebody writes a few books or even one book, they get more elevated? They become the popular person, the girl, the woman that says what we're all supposed to do. And that if we fall out of line with that, it's not okay. How many women would have done that with our gal in Madison who had the stickering going on? They could have done to her for like, I don't know, you're taking a risk. But she does it in a way, these charges are being threatened against her. And now all of a sudden, those same women that maybe wouldn't have supported her before, because we know this history goes on with certain individuals that really get very little support and they're doing really good work. And now all of a sudden they're kind of railing around that because a legal thing happened and it suits their narrative. It suits that agenda. If I had had my face broken, whether it's at a clinic protest or Netflix, fake walkout, or tomorrow if I go and I do something, is that going to serve the movement? Is having a broken face and blood? We're not back in those days.
Yeah.
And I refuse to go back to those days. And the other thing is, I don't teach NVDA again in my protest things. Again, you get knocked down, there's a certain protection that we can do as much as we can to try to guard that person that's already been knocked down. And that's it. I've got protocols in place for that, but protest is over. Person is going to, their natural reaction might be to jump up on their feet and want to punch that other person. We're going to try to diffuse it as quickly as possible. Protest's over. Does that sound like somebody that thrives on violence and wants to have, people get hurt? I don't. It's just the opposite. And again, may sound defensive about that, but these things have come up and we both know. And what's important for me is working with these parents, working with people that have been non-activists in general that haven't been able to have the privilege and the advantage that I did for years of working out in gymnasiums, the opposition, and all of the threats that could take place. Doing a flash mob, going through the market. This is part of the animal rights stuff. Planning a demonstration in front of the butcher counter at a market and screaming out to people and planting, pamphlets all over and then running out because we knew we would be arrested. It's theater. It's theater. And, you plan where your cars are going to be. You plan all of this stuff as much as you can. And that's a flash mob kind of a thing. It's not, this idea of protesting is just, it's one of resistance and it comes in many forms.
Mhm. Yeah, so we probably got to wrap this up a little bit, but how would a parent or anybody who's interested in Can I Get a Witness, how could they get involved?
So a couple of different ways I've got, since I don't have an official website now, I don't even know if that's coming at this point. And I know on Facebook, Can I Get a Witness Voices? You can type that in and find that page and DM. The other thing is I have a podcast, and for any parents watching this, and if you're wondering, am I alone? What's going on? Like, I have a podcast on, it came out of SoundCloud. Can I Get a Witness Voices? And you can write in there. People, put comments under. I've got 2 podcasts. This thing just got birthed like 3 months ago. I have one podcast with 5 mothers talking. I barely speak. I'm letting the voices of 5 mothers speak about their situations with their ROGD kids and that. Then the second podcast I did, which came about 2 months after, is with 3 different fathers and their stories and what they think about things. And then there's comments and stuff, but both ways, I can be contacted like that. And be looking out on Twitter for anything that you see. I've got people that are protesting in different cities and they will protest, but protest pictures up and stuff with the hashtag, Can I Get a Witness? Wake Up America was another hashtag. You'll see the earlier protest in March. Hashtag Pull Back the Curtain. It's pulling back the curtain. It looks like it's got the colors of the, this ideology. It's a thing like this, pulling back the curtain on the truth, which is the money, the medications, the surgeries and all that for kids. You can go on Twitter and you'll find a lot of images of a bunch of different individuals protesting all over the country. And I have a BitChute channel. Can I Get a Witness? And I believe it has voices. Can I Get a Witness on BitChute? And you can type in protests and my channel will come up. You can see all the protests that have happened, except I've been remiss and haven't had time to put up the last 2 in video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I want to point out is with the Can I Get a Witness protests is that they are kind of secret until they happen. Because sometimes you'll see like memes and stuff go around saying there's going to be a protest here, like with what happened with We Spa. That got circulated and that got big and dangerous. But these protests that are like, they're very insular, and then they happen, and then people can see it on social media. So I want to point that out for any like parents, for example, who want to get involved, that there are a lot more safety precautions around the Can I Get a Witness protests than, you know, something that you just see floating around. There's going to be, like, even Netflix, there's going to be a protest on this day. Like, there's no real announcement that can attract bad people, counter protesters.
Yeah, and it's a good thing you brought that up and you mentioned WeSpa, and it's like I don't think that that's ever going to get played down, that really was not an organized protest. It was a real, again, you mentioned about, I talked about Hollywood, it's all these fake, you know, people are, it's all performative. And I knew when the mom put the thing in our group and said, dare we? And I saw the Netflix and I went, we're going to be performing. That is very different than performing the part of being a protester at these clinics where, you know, you've got rules and guidelines. You're responsible just as everybody else is responsible for you. That's a serious, it becomes like a job, you know, for in that time. And it takes a lot of stamina and it takes a lot of focus to do that. So WeSpa was a setup. It was a complete and utter setup. And again, that's the thing, is that we're getting so much fake news and so much this and that. You have to really look at, well, who's putting this thing on? Just like any conference or whatever. Like, again, I go back to the integrity of a person. How do we know each other? How do we know who to pay attention to or to check out and make a decision about? I didn't grow up at a time where we were like, I'm going to get followers. To me, that's like, I don't want people stalking me. Get away. But can you imagine? I mean, in terms of the vernacular and everything that we're used to now, and if I meet you or say that, you know, we connected up on a dating app or something, and one of the first things that we get to know each other, because I go, ooh, she's got lots of followers. There's something that is gravely missing in that. I want to know, do you have friends? Do you have real life friends that would actually put, you know, road to the rubber with you on issues? That's what I've had in my life. That's what I've collected and tried to do, is friends. And in terms of a movement or politics, I don't look for friends. That's why I can't be cancelable in that way. Nobody can tell me anything that's going to crush me and I'm going to stop doing the work. If friendships develop over time, that's gravy. That's great. I got comrades, you know, we have similar ways that we're doing things. We decide to work on projects together, but I didn't get into this to make friends because I'm used to other people going like, she's too this or that. I don't want to, you know, might be too scary, might be too radical. Oh my God, if I hang out with her, I'm going to lose followers. I'm going to lose friends. So yeah, it's one of those things. And I'm glad you brought that up about the security. Yeah, because with WeSpa and everything, when you see something going on like that, or somebody has ahead of time announced something like it's a road show or like they're a band and you're going to get to come see them like they're on tour, you know, it's always like, okay, who's organizing this? Who's producing this? What other production skills do they have? What else have they done? And can I find it online? Do I know somebody that knows them? Can they vouch for them? Basically, it's a thing of, it's gotten so we need to know the integrity of people, even if they have detractors that don't like them. I was a manager in the field of painting for years. I had men that literally told me, you know, damn it, you piss me off, but you're a good manager. I said, hey, I didn't come here to make friends with people, but you know, if you like me, that's gravy. But you know, I'm literally bossing around these men. They'd say, I don't particularly like you. I had one man say that to me, and he told me that you're a taste that it requires, what is that? You're
An acquired taste.
an acquired taste, Joey. That's fine. I can dig that. That's okay. But I respect you. That's the thing. There's been a lot of people that I worked with in this movement where I'm like, yeah, I don't like this or that, but you know what? I respect her work. It's like I say, I respect a tremendous amount about Megan. There's not a lot of people that I could say that about. You know, they're literally probably a dozen. And that's unfortunate, but you know, it is what it is. And yeah, and work that you guys are doing with WLRN and even allowing long-term interviews like this. This is some rich material. WLRN, like I said before, and I was working with Thistle Around stuff, this is so important because you're capturing also historical things that will live there probably, for a long time, whether it's the podcast, YouTube's, written interviews, whatever. So I appreciate what you guys are doing a lot and your work in it.
Well, thank you. And thank you for speaking with me today and giving me your time.
You're more than welcome. See you around.
Thanks for tuning in to another WLRN extended interview. If you like what you are hearing and would like to donate to the cause of feminist community radio, please visit our WordPress site and click on the donate button. Check out our merch tab to get a nice gift in exchange for your donation. And if you are interested in joining our team, we are always looking for new volunteers to conduct interviews, write blog posts, post to our Facebook and other social media pages, and do other tasks to keep us moving forward as a collective of media activist women. Thanks for listening. This is WLRN Canadian member April No, signing off for now.